Hello. Welcome to my channel. Enjoy the video. She was laid down on her bed and wondered if she had fallen asleep without turning off the lights. She realized she had woken up earlier than usual and asked herself what time it was now. Checking her phone, she saw it was Saturday, November 25th. At 6 in the morning, she stood up, left the room, and met her husband sitting on the balcony of the kitchen. He reminded her that they had a wedding to attend that afternoon and mentioned that a car would be sent for her at 4 o'clock. She thought about how she had hoped not to run into him, since whenever she saw him she felt suffocated. As she passed by, she reflected that there was a wall between them, a boundary he had set, a rule he had declared on the very day she stepped into that house. She lived with a man who had forbidden her to cross that door. Later, at the wedding of his second cousin, they sat at a table together. She watched the bride's happiness and thought that was how someone was supposed to look on such a day. Suddenly, his aunt asked why the two of them weren't having a child yet, since it had already been 2 years since their marriage. At the sudden question, her fork slipped from her hand. She bent down to pick it up from the floor. He responded that it had only been 2 years, that they were still newlyweds, and that children were not on their minds just yet. She thought to herself that he was skilled at acting. He continued by saying that she was only 25 and still wanted to study more, while his hand grasped her shoulder. His aunt asked what her major had been, and he leaned closer to her, smiling, and answered for her that it was archaeology and art history. The aunt questioned if that was even worth studying, insisting she should not put off having children and that studies could wait. Yeonu said nothing, only listening, and thought once again that she did not belong among those people. She eventually left the table to get some air and wandered into the garden, where she spotted a puppy with yellow fur. She bent down and wondered softly if it too was alone. The little animal looked at her with energy. She gazed at it pitifully and noticed its left paw was injured, cut by glass. She called to a man passing by and asked if he had a first aid kit for the puppy. He handed her one, and she tended the wound herself. As the puppy looked at her, she suddenly heard words echoing inside her mind, telling her that the little one had been lonely, that it was not its fault, that it was thankful, and that they would meet again. She thought it strange to hear such a voice. Seonjae appeared then, asking what she was doing there and saying he had been looking for her. His gaze shifted to the puppy in her arms, and he questioned what had happened to her clothes. She explained that the animal was hurt and she had treated its wounds. He told her that it was time to go. At the entrance of the house, he remarked that she might be a little too nosy, treating someone else's dog and staining her dress with blood. She replied that the puppy had been injured and she simply couldn't ignore it. Just then, his friends called for him, urging him to hurry as they were waiting. 5 of them stood together, 2 women and 3 men. He told them to wait, saying he needed to speak with Yeonu first. One teased him as a lovebird and called her sister-in-law, before he sharply reminded them to call her by her name. Suddenly, he pulled her into his arms, whispering that his aunts were watching them. After a moment, he stepped away, remarking that they probably wanted to confirm something. He raised his hand to caress her cheek, guiding her to lift her chin and embrace his neck. She thought bitterly that the act was beginning again, an act performed solely for his relatives. This was the man she lived with. They kissed romantically, yet she thought to herself that she was merely surviving each day. But today would be the last day. She would comply with whatever he wanted because soon she would no longer be with him. She was determined to divorce him. Her thoughts drifted back to the day they had decided to marry 2 years ago. She had been rushing with her academic books when his piercing blue eyes had noticed her. Young and inexperienced, she had still believed in the hierarchy of society. She had stumbled, scattering her books across the ground. As she tried to gather them, he appeared before her, offering a handkerchief. She once thought of him as a savior. She had accepted it, and that moment had marked the beginning of everything. Later, they had sat across from each other in the living room. He had asked if she wanted to marry him, and she had been taken aback. He explained that he needed to marry immediately but lacked a bride, saying it would be a win-win since she needed to escape her current situation. She had accepted, thinking it might be fate, perhaps a lifeline sent by heaven. He had extended his hand and called it a wise choice. Now, as she stared at their wedding picture, she thought about how she had been unable to sleep the night before out of excitement. She began to write a letter, addressing him. It was the first and last letter she would write to him, since it was time to end their relationship. She recalled what he had told her when they first married, that after 2 years, she could do whatever she wanted. That memory had been her source of hope. She wrote that she knew their relationship had become meaningless and that she wanted only one thing: divorce. She begged him to let her go, confessing that she too longed for happiness. Pausing, she closed the envelope, thinking bitterly that their marriage had only ever existed on paper, nothing more than a facade. As tears unexpectedly rolled down her cheeks, she asked herself why she was crying when she had never loved him. Later, when he read the letter, she prepared to leave the house with her luggage. She called out to him, asking if he had seen the documents she had left on the table. He confirmed he had. She responded with relief and placed her wedding ring on the table in front of him. He picked it up, placed it back in her hand, and told her to keep it, saying he didn't care if she wore it or not, one never knew. She agreed quietly, addressing him as Seonjae. He told her that even after 2 years, he still wasn't used to hearing that name from her. At the door, she turned back to say goodbye, and he told her she was free to return whenever she wished. She reflected that once, her heart had raced at the sight of him, but not a single day had passed in their marriage without her feeling lonely. Now she was ready to break free from the role of his wife. Opening the door, she thought that from this moment forward, her real life as Yeonu Lee was about to begin. Months later, after she had left the house, he arrived at the place she was staying, soaked with rain and without an umbrella. She worried that perhaps he had changed his mind and would not proceed with the divorce. She asked how he had known where she was, and he explained that her brother had told him some time ago. She said she would not change her mind simply because he was there, and he agreed, bowing his head in quiet defeat. He said he had only wanted to see how she was doing and then turned to leave, wishing her well. She thought it strange that he had come only for that, wondering why he had appeared so suddenly. On the official day of the divorce, it was finalized. At 26, she had already gone through marriage and separation. Looking at the sky, she thought she might forever be remembered as both a divorcee and a fallen Cinderella, yet she could finally breathe again. He, observing her smile, asked how she had been and mentioned that he had burned his arm and fallen down the stairs on the very day the divorce papers were signed. She said she had hurt herself while playing with a friend, and he advised her to be careful. He confessed that there had only been one reason he had agreed to the divorce, because she had wanted it. Her eyes widened, and she thought angrily that he was the root cause of it all. She told him he could now remove his wedding ring, though she noted inwardly that he hadn't worn it 2 weeks earlier anyway. He looked at it but did not remove it, instead suggesting they have tea together. She refused, saying she had plans, but offered to meet another time, perhaps after several months if free. He accepted, wishing her well, and extended his hand. She took it, telling him she was grateful. As they walked, he told her he had sent a gift to celebrate their divorce, which would arrive later. She wondered silently what it could be. Her phone soon buzzed with a notification. He had transferred 10 billion won into her account. She thought in despair that he was not letting her go and ran in his direction, determined to refuse the money. He was standing on the sidewalk, looking down at his ring, and thought to himself that he had never taken it off since their marriage. As he tried to remove it, it slipped from his hand and rolled into the street. He bent to retrieve it, but when he rose, he realized too late that he was standing in the path of something coming quickly. At that moment, Yeonu was calling out to him from a distance. A bus approached, and in an instant, he was struck. The last thing he saw was her face. March 2nd, the official day of their divorce, was the day she believed she would begin a new life. Instead, her husband died and left her forever. She had wanted to erase him from her life and start fresh, but this was not the ending she had imagined. Trembling, she stood and watched as men carried him to an ambulance. Everything slowed around her. The next day, his picture rested among white flowers at the funeral. Only his parents knew of the divorce, so she continued the role of his wife. Under heavy rain, she stood with a black umbrella when his mother handed her his wallet, saying there was something inside she should see. Opening it, the first thing she found was her wedding photo, smiling with flowers in hand. She asked why it was there. His mother explained that he had held tightly to his ring until the end, that he had never been good at expressing himself, and she asked that Yeonu not hate him too much. Memories flooded back of the first time they had met, when his eyes had been cold but his hands were warm. She remembered telling him he had pretty hands, and how he had responded that she was pretty too, leaving her flustered. In the present, she stood before his name engraved in stone, holding his wallet on her birthday in the rain. Returning home, she entered and thought she smelled flowers. She found a basket waiting for her. Not once had she cried through his funeral, feeling unworthy of tears. But at that moment, she broke down, trembling, feeling as if she had no right to grieve. She saw the card he had written, wishing her a happy birthday and signed with his name. She thought desperately for him to explain why he had sent it. She asked inwardly why he had never told her anything, why he had always been so cold, why he had made her give up on him, and why he had left her with so many unanswered questions. Lying in bed, she thought of how many things she still wanted to ask him, wishing she could go back in time and speak to him while he was still alive. She woke up the next day, groggy and still wrapped in grief. Reaching for her cell phone, she wondered if she had fallen asleep without turning the lights off and what time it was now. Standing up slowly, she told herself that life went on, but at the same time asked why she was in that room, why she was wearing those clothes, and if she was dreaming. She checked the cell phone again and saw that it was Saturday, November 25th. At 6 a.m. shock ran through her as she realized she had fallen asleep and that 9 months had already passed. She hurried out of the room, convinced it didn't make sense, and recognized that she was in the house she had once shared with Seonjae. She went straight to his room, questioning if it was possible. Taking a cautious peek, she saw it dark and clean. She entered, hesitating over whether it would be good to touch the bed or not, but in the next second she was under him, feeling the warmth of his hand as he caressed her cheek. Her eyes opened wide as she saw him without a t-shirt, staring at her with those blue eyes. Both of them were wearing their wedding rings. He looked down at her with a questioning expression while she remained in shock and surprise, only able to stare at him. Covering her mouth with her hands, she screamed inwardly at the impossibility of it, recognizing his face and his expression. Tears welled in her eyes as she processed his voice and wondered aloud why he was there. He answered her simply, as if nothing unusual had happened. Touching his chest, she wondered if he was really alive or if he was a ghost, yet he was seriously alive. He asked what her problem was, complaining about being bothered so early in the morning, while she confirmed to herself that it was definitely him. She apologized and called the incident an accident, thinking whether she had traveled back in time or simply had a very long nightmare, telling him she had dreamed something bad. He turned away and told her she should visit the hospital and reminded her of a wedding they were to attend that afternoon, saying he would send a car for her at 4 o'clock. She stared at him, hearing the exact same words from before everything had happened, and realized this wasn't a dream. She had really come back. Her wish had come true. Hours later, she was staring at the same dress she had worn before, remembering how she had almost frozen to death last time because it was too thin. Deciding to wear something else, she told herself that if she was going to change the future, she would start from there. When she arrived at the wedding, she approached him wearing a dark blue dress and letting her long brown hair flow, looking stunning. He blushed and couldn't help but admire her beauty, quickly turning away to hide his reaction and telling her to follow him to eat with his aunt and uncle. At the table, his aunt suddenly asked why the two of them weren't having a child yet, even though it had been 2 years since they married. The fork slipped from her hand at the sudden question, and she thought how everything was unfolding exactly as in the past. She wondered whether breaking the order or making another choice would change the future, and whether she could stop the outcome in which he died. That he calmly replied that it had only been 2 years, that they were still newlyweds and not thinking of children just yet. She thought to herself that the conversation was exactly as she remembered. He added that Yeonu was only 25 and wanted to study, his hand grasping her shoulder just as he had done before. Even this touch was the same. His aunt asked what her major was, and he leaned toward her, smiling, to answer for her, archaeology and art history. She listened to their comments and decided to try something different, taking a deep breath and telling herself she could do it. She then spoke up, smiling, saying that they were only seeing the downside. The table fell silent at her comment, and she wondered if she could really go back in time again. Her aunt grew angry and demanded to know what she had just said. Seonjae stared at Yeonu in surprise, waiting for her to answer. She explained, her hands trembling like a frightened rabbit, that she wasn't just studying how to dig up rocks but how to discover historical artifacts with symbolic meaning and interpret them. Her aunt responded with the roar of a tiger, telling her she was free to defend her major but needed to see reality, that she wouldn't gain any personal development from it and that it was useless. Feeling stabbed by the words, Yeonu thought her aunt wouldn't let her off the hook but decided to toss all the comments aside and make her respect her. She brought up the celadon she had once seen at the aunt's house, explaining that although it had been called a celadon from the Koryo dynasty, it was actually a counterfeit made in China. The aunt was visibly shaken. Yeonu continued, saying that one could check the sunken relief engraved at the bottom to confirm its origin and that archaeology and art history gave objects their real value. She smiled and said she would be happy to rate the aunt's artifacts if they were brought to her office, just with prior notice to adjust her schedule. Seonjae stared at her with admiration and surprise, covering his mouth with his hand and laughing, something Yeonu had rarely seen him do. She looked at him, thinking in disbelief that Seonjae had laughed. He smiled at her and asked why she had never told them something so important before. She thought bitterly that she hadn't wanted to put him in an uncomfortable situation. She then explained that since the aunt had already paid the full amount, it couldn't be returned anyway. The aunt demanded to know why she was bringing it up now, and Yeonu smiled, saying that just as they were worried about the couple having children, she too wanted to express her concerns. Seonjae smirked and told his aunt and uncle that they would take care of the issue themselves and that there was no need for concern anymore. The aunt excused herself to go to the restroom, the others also leaving, until only the two of them were at the table. He praised her, telling her to keep doing what she had just done from now on and that there was no need to go along with what others said. She thought about his words, realizing that he was different from before. If he could change as much as she changed, then she could start altering things one by one, including the day he died. She resolved to change all the moments she regretted, one by one. Her mind drifted to the dog she had once saved and she remembered she needed to rescue Goldie. He noticed something was wrong and she stood up, saying she needed to go somewhere. She went to the garden but found no dog or doghouse. The place was empty. She wondered where the puppy had gone, thinking it strange. A man behind her asked what she was looking for and she explained about the puppy with golden fur and clear eyes. She looked at the man and noticed he was exactly like the dog. He apologized, tilting his head in the same way. She dismissed it and asked if he had seen a little puppy around. He said he wasn't sure. She then noticed his finger was hurt and asked if he had injured his hand. He hid it, saying he had accidentally touched some broken glass. She thought about how Goldie had also cut his paw with broken glass. She called to another man passing by and asked for a first aid kit so this one could be treated. The man observed that she seemed like the type who couldn't pass by injured people, and she admitted that was true while she placed a band-aid on his finger. He smiled, saying he wouldn't need to go to the hospital anymore. She insisted he should still go, her expression determined. He offered his cell phone to show his gratitude later and asked for her number, but she raised her hands and declined. Spotting her husband coming closer, she bowed to the man, saying goodbye and telling him to make sure to get the injury treated. The man and Seonjae stared at each other with serious faces, the blue eyes meeting the lilac ones in silent conversation. When she came closer, Seonjae asked who the man was. She explained she had just helped him because he hurt his hand. He turned away, telling her to let other people help him, that it didn't have to be her. He added that he would be home late that day and told her she could go in first. His friends called for him, 5 of them waiting, 2 women and 3 men. He asked them to wait a second because he needed to talk with Yeonu. One of them groaned, calling them lovebirds and saying goodbye to his sister-in-law. Seonjae corrected them, telling them to call her Yeonu. She thought about how she remembered every single part of this conversation and the jokes they made. Suddenly, he hugged her and drew her close, whispering that his aunts were watching them. Then he moved away, saying he guessed they wanted to make sure about something. She sank into her emotions, thinking she already knew what would happen afterward. The only way to change the future here was to not kiss, but she needed to pretend they were an affectionate couple. This was the only thing she could do right now. Raising her arms, she placed them around his neck. He was startled by her initiative and her attitude toward him, his eyes opening wide. She told herself she would not let the past repeat itself, would not let it go by like before, because she had traveled all the way back in time to save him. She smiled at him, a genuine smile, something she had never done before. And he stared at her in surprise, shock, and awe at the feeling rising within him, something new he had never felt before. That's it for today. If you liked, don't forget to enable the YouTube notification bell and subscribe to follow the next parts. If you want a continuation, mention in comments. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.